in your failure. Keeping your faith in your failure. So if you return with me to 2 Samuel, chapter 12. Oh, I'm sorry. Starting at 11. Chapter 11. 2 Samuel 11 and 2. It says, and it came to pass in the evening tide that David arose off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. And the woman was very beautiful to look upon. So King David arises out of bed and couldn't sleep, whatever, decides to go take a walk up on his roof, and he peers down and he sees a beautiful woman basically taking a bath. And he stops. And he's just watching her. You may be seeing. This is the same David that grew up worshiping God, that was so in love with God, he gave his all to God. This is the same David that was anointed to be king, that God chose him out of all his brothers. Remember that? Remember when the prophet came to David's house and said, one of your sons, I'm here to anoint. And his dad got all proud and he called all his big, strong, good-looking boys out. And the prophet went to each one and said, nope, not this one. Nope, not this one. Dad's like, oh, it's got to be this one. Nope, not that one. We do them all. And said, wait a minute. Somebody's missing. Because God told me that the king was going to be here, that I was to anoint someone from your house, one of your sons. Someone that they just passed up. But his dad said, oh, it couldn't be David.
Right.
He's young, he's scrawny, he just takes care of the herds. It can't be him. But see, that's our God. Our God doesn't work the way that we work. Our God doesn't think the way that we think. See, in their mind, it was the strongest. It was going to be the smartest, the strongest, the one who was meant to be a leader. But God said, no, that's not doing anything for me. That's not giving me any glory. See, he didn't come to say, yeah, give me your strongest, the one who's already a leader. The one that's already made to be that. God said, no, I want the one that loves me more than anything. I want the one that has faith in me to change his life, to make a difference in his life, to make him what I want him to be. Right. So he anointed David. But this is the David I'm talking about. This is the David who fought off bears, who fought a bear, who fought a lion. Not on his own might, but by the faith in God, that his God would supply him with the strength, that his God would supply him with the need. That's the kind of faith that we need to have, church. That kind of faith that no matter what we go through, God is there on our side. God will supply our needs. God will see us through it. This is the same David that came before the armies and said, why isn't somebody out there shutting that man's mouth when he's bad-mouthing our God? And they're all like, well, look at the size of him. He's a giant. What are we going to do? We can't beat him. And David said, even we can't, but I know a God who can. I know a God who can. I know a God helped me fight off a bear. I know a God that helped me fight off a lion. And that's just a man. That is faith. To walk out there and take him on and to be him. That's the David that we're reading about here. A David that had so much faith. A David that loved God so much. That's all he did all day long while he was tending to the flocks, was worship God and praise God and talk to God. God was his best friend. How many of us here tonight consider Jesus our best friend? How many of us here tonight spend that kind of time and devotion to Jesus? How many of us here tonight were wondering how many more songs are we going to listen to? How many more songs are going to play before we get into the preaching, before we can get out of here? I hope no one. Because we got to have the faith that God is going to get us through. So here's David, who is looking at a woman taking a bath, lust of the eyes. If you read a little bit further, he actually has her, he calls for her to come into his room, basically. He lays with her, lust of the flesh. I mean, that's 2 strikes right there. And then he falls for her so hard that he has her husband killed. Pride of life. All 3 strike. The trifecta. All of them, right there. All the big ones, the major ones. That pride got to him. I'm the king. I can have anything I want. Oh, she's married? Well, we can take care of that real easy. Had a man killed so he can have her. He failed. He failed. He failed God. He failed in his walk with God. And I'm here to tell you tonight that even though you fail, or I fail, we can't lose our faith in God. We've got to know that God is still on our side. And we may fail, but God is there to pick us back up.
Right.
Chapter 12, verse 15. Says, and Nathan departed into his house, and the Lord struck the child. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. David and Bathsheba had a kid from this. David ended up marrying her after her husband was killed, and they had a kid. And the Lord sent Nathan to speak to David. So in verse 15 it says, and Nathan departed into the house, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. And David therefore besought God for the child. And David fasted and went in and lay all night upon the earth. See, even though David failed, and I'd say he failed miserably, he had enough faith in God. Because he remembered all that God had done for him. He remembered all the things that God has brought him through. He started to fast and pray and worship for an answer from God. The boy died. See, we may fail, and we may have to answer for what we have done. We will have to answer for our sins. But God still forgave David. God still blessed David. God still worked in David's life. I'm here to tell you, it don't matter how bad you fail. If you keep your faith in God, God will bring you through it. God will deliver you. God will make a difference in your life if you just keep your faith in your failure. See, if you fail and you start doubting God, if you start thinking that God has turned his back on you, you're going to start to walk away. You need to know that God is going to forgive you, and you need to forgive yourself of your failures. The Bible tells us that we are made overcomers by the word of our testimony. I'm here to tell you tonight, I have probably failed more than all of you put together. I'd be willing to say that. I have probably failed more than all of you put together. And yet, here I stand tonight before you, worshiping the Lord, being led by the Lord, being filled with the Holy Ghost. I'm here to tell you, it don't matter how bad you fail. If you keep your faith in God, God will deliver. God will keep moving in your life, and God will make a difference. But you can't give up. You can't give up. We're going to have failures. It's going to happen. See, what God did, if you read more in Samuel, God sent someone to remind David of what God has done for him. He had to remind David, hey, didn't I anoint you to be king? Wasn't I with you on the battlefield? Did I not do all these things for you? See, I don't want to get to the point where God has to remind me of what he's done for me. That's why, no matter what I'm going through, my faith is strong. Because I know what God has brought me from. I know what God has done for me. And I know every time I fail, God has been there to pick me up. I know God has been there in my life every step of the way. I remember rolling my car going 80 miles an hour. That thing rolled like four or five times on I-25. And the whole passenger side of that car was just smashed in completely. And there was like a shell around where I sat. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. That was God. That was nothing but God. That wasn't fancy driving on my part because I rolled my car. That wasn't me just, I mean, even at that age, I wasn't serving God at all. But God had a plan. Right. Don't ever doubt that God doesn't have a plan for you. Don't ever doubt it for a minute. You may not be as close to God right now as he wants you to be. But if you keep your faith, if you keep fighting, if you keep pushing, God will bring you to a place that he wants you. When I was rolling down the highway, holding on to that steering wheel for life, watching all my windows get shattered, it was like slow motion. It just seemed to go forever. I'll never forget that, ever. I'm just thinking about it, reliving it like it was just yesterday. I'll never forget it. But I don't think about it often. But when I do, I just thank God. Because his hand was on me. People have died in such less accidents than what that was. My car was completely totaled. You couldn't even recognize it. And as it was just rolling, it was like just rolling on mattresses. Just soft. That was God's hand on that car. Never in my mind did I get out of that car and be like, oh God, you're calling me to preach, aren't you? Oh Lord, you're calling me to be a worship leader, aren't you? No, that was the farthest thing from my mind. When I was young, I was 17 years old. I mean, that was, believe me, all I could think about was the next party. 16. I don't remember. I was young. But all I can, it's just, God's got it all worked out. And you got to have faith that God has it all worked out. You got to trust in God. You got to know that God is going to take care of it all, no matter how bad it gets. God is going to take care of it all. It don't matter. God is going to take care of it all. You may lose everything, but you know what? You're still serving God. And that's better to serve God and lose everything than to have everything and not to serve God.
Amen.
I mean, you believe that? I hope so, because it's true. In, let's go to Romans 8:28. It says, we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. Church, we got to be in His purpose. See, we can come to church and we can love God, but we can not be in His purpose. We can be out of His will. But it doesn't work the other way. You can't be in His will and not love Him. See, if you love God and you trust in God and you have faith in God and you're doing His purpose, His will, then all things will work together for good. He's watching out for us. He's watching out for us. You may be struggling. I'll tell you right now, I'm struggling. I'm not struggling with my walk with God, but I'm struggling with what's going on in my business. My truck has been down for 3 weeks. I have not been able to work. My truck has been in the shop, and I can't even get them to tell me what's wrong with it. I got a warranty, and I took it to another shop to get some work done, and they said, well, we're not going to cover it because it's a commercial vehicle. The enemy is trying to tear us down. That's what I'm getting at. I'm telling you right now, I know what the enemy wants from me. The enemy wants me to curse God and give up. He wants me to blame God for what's going on. And I told him, I'm not going to do that. I don't care if I lose everything. I don't care if all the debt collectors come at my house at one time. I don't care. I'm going to serve God. I'm going to trust in God. Let me tell you, I've been on the mountain for so long, I forgot what it's like to live in the valley. And I'm finding out what it's like to live in the valley again. My kids have been on the mountaintop for so long, they don't understand what it's like to be in the valley. They don't understand what it's like to have a worry about what's happening. But that's okay, because I don't want them to have to worry about that. I'm not worried about it, because I've got faith in my failures. I have failed many, many times in my walk with God, but I've never lost my faith. Because he doesn't have to remind me. I remember what he's brought me from. I remember what he's done for me. I remember how many times he's saved my life. I remember how many times he's just touched me when I should have been dead. I remember all the times when I had nothing and all of a sudden there was something. I remember. And I have failed since then. But I haven't lost my faith in God. See, that's one thing the enemy can't take from us. He can take, if God lets him, he can take our material things. He can take our jobs. He can take our family. He can't take our faith. He can't take our faith. He can't take our love from God, and that's what he wants to do. I know. I see right through him. I know he wants me just to be mad at God and say, oh God, you prophesied over me. You said you were going to do that. And I'm not going to do that. Because I know how good my God is. When I come into a place of worship and I let it all go and God whispers in my ear and says, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Just keep living for me. Keep trusting in me. Keep your faith in me. You'll get through this. I will bring you through this. Anybody else go through something? Listen to God when he tells you he will bring you through this. He is trying to beat us down. My God, the enemy. If you're not showing God the faith, if you're not listening to what God is telling you, well, maybe it is God then. Maybe God is beating you down. Maybe God's saying, hey, I've tried it this way. I've tried it the nice way. And you just ain't getting it. You're missing it. So now I'm going to have to get a little rough with you. Yeah, God will do that. See, there's churches out there that will preach the total opposite. They're going to sugarcoat, oh no, we serve a loving God. God would never do that to you. God would never punish you. God would never, really? How many people died in the Bible because they didn't listen to God? This child of David's and Bathsheba's, what did he do? It wasn't like he was the one that ordered the death. It wasn't him that told David to fall into the lust. It wasn't him that told David to sin, because he wasn't even born yet. But yet God struck him down. So you don't tell me that God won't pour out some vengeance on you. That God won't pour out some punishment on you or me. He will. But you've got to have faith through it all. That no matter what, even though we fail, even though we fail each other sometimes, even though we fail the church sometimes, even though we fail God, we've got to keep our faith. Amen. Because our faith is what's going to get us through this. Our faith is what's going to carry us through our trial. Our faith in God is what's going to get us to heaven. Our faith is what's going to keep us whole. It's what's going to heal us. It's what's going to deliver us. It's what's going to take us to the next level. It's our faith. Our faith in God. That He has done all this. And He will continue. If we continue to love Him and to be in His will and to do what it is He's asked us to do. In 1 Corinthians 10:8, 10 and 13. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able. God is not going to give you more than you can handle. He's not going to let the temptations be so strong that it's going to destroy your life, that it's going to destroy you. It may seem like it. It may seem like the world is just bearing down on you, that the weight is so heavy that you're about to lose it all. But God says, I'm faithful. And if you're faithful, I'll bring you through it. But will, with the temptation, also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. He says it right there. It's going to be rough. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. But He will make a way for us to escape it. I don't know if any of you are feeling like you failed God. That you failed in some way. But I'm here to tell you, it's not too late. If you just keep your faith, if you just keep pushing on, if you keep showing up, and if you just keep worshiping God, if you keep praising God, if you just ask for forgiveness, He will forgive you. He's not a man that He can lie.